and action words that go with daily routine. So for example, if a little one is reaching up to you or you're reaching down to pick them up, before you pick them up, you say up and pick them up. So they start to know, oh, I can make that sound. I can do that thing when I reach my arms up. And that's a really nice way to start to attach language to the behaviors that you're seeing and teach kiddos that they have the power to do that as well.
Your dream is to become a mom. My dream is to help you get there. I'm Rebecca Gruenspan, a single mom through domestic adoption and an adoption consultant for over a decade. I'll be your guide, along with other adoption professionals and members of the adoption constellation, walking you step by step down this beautiful and complex path of adopting your baby. When I was going through the adoption process, I had no idea what I was doing, what I needed to know, or more importantly, who to trust. Well, after helping hundreds and hundreds of families grow through the beauty and complexity of adoption, I've learned more than a thing or two, and let me tell you, it's not always rainbows and butterflies. This isn't just another podcast sharing adoption stories, but it's for you if you're genuinely committed to diving in with an open heart, eager to learn everything there is to know about adopting a baby so that you can show up for yourself and your child in the best way possible. This podcast is for you if you're ready to put your newfound knowledge into action. Adoption isn't for the weak of heart, and it certainly isn't done when your baby gets placed in your arms. If that's what you think, I'm afraid you're living in la-la land. My promise to you is to keep it real if you promise to keep digging. We'll acknowledge the hard, and we'll also celebrate the joy that is adoption. You ready? Let's do this. Ever wonder about the intricate needs of children finding their way into new families through adoption? How can we ensure their healthy development, communication, and feeding needs are met with care and understanding? It's probably not something you often think about until you have to. Today, we're talking with an esteemed guest whose passion and expertise have shaped the lives of countless families. Maureen Dikinga, a doctor of public health and a veteran pediatric speech-language pathologist with over 2 decades of experience. Currently living in Seattle, Washington, her role as a thought leader at global events to her hands-on work in orphanages and foster care settings have taken her all over the globe to places like Ethiopia, Zambia, Bulgaria, Vietnam, and beyond. Maureen's commitment to nurturing caregivers and empowering communities has been a tapestry of compassion and knowledge. With a heart dedicated to promoting health literacy and equity, Maureen's impact extends beyond clinical practices. As CEO and founder of Exalt Implementation Institute, she leads a charge for transformative change, aligning research with real-world solutions to uplift the well-being of infants, children, and individuals with special healthcare needs. I think we're in for a fascinating conversation today. Welcome to the Adoption Roadmap podcast, Maureen. That was all a big mouthful. Let's jump right in with my first question, and I'd love to start maybe by having you share a favorite story you have about your work. You've certainly led a fascinating life with all your world travels and the work that you're so fortunate to do.
So much for having me today. I'm delighted to be here and to speak with you. I have so many wonderful stories to share, but I thought maybe one of the most meaningful ones for this audience would be talking a little bit about how I came to work with children who have been adopted or who are going to be adopted. And my work started as a speech pathologist, working with little ones and their caregivers. And I started to notice that some of the children that had eating difficulties came from orphanage settings, and they were challenged by feeding in very unique ways. And so through my work in my private practice, I moved on to work with a nonprofit who was really interested in building feeding programs and training caregivers across the globe to see if we could prevent some of those feeding difficulties for kiddos, either in their lifespan or prior to adoption, so that we could make that a little bit easier. And so that's really how I started working with with little ones who had been adopted and supporting their families. And since then, I've just tried to have greater and greater impact by not only providing education and advocacy, but really looking at the systems of support that we have and seeing where we can improve those.
Yeah, definitely. I mean, there's a lot of improvement that needs to happen, I'm sure, and we'll get into that in a minute. But you talked a little bit about feeding issues. What are some of those feeding issues and challenges, and how early do they manifest? Like, what should we be looking for as parents?
It's a great question. So the first thing to really think about is every feeding relationship is unique, and it can take some time to have success. It isn't always intuitive, it isn't always natural, and it isn't always easy. Sometimes feeding difficulties show up from the very beginning when a baby is tiny, when we first meet an infant, and sometimes they show up at critical developmental periods. So when we move from the suck swallow reflex moves from being a reflex to being something that the baby's in charge of doing. That's around 4 to 6 months. So that's one of those critical periods you might see challenges emerge. Also, you'll see challenges emerge when we start to introduce solid foods. That can be another time that can be a little bit challenging. And then as the little one gets older and we want to expand their repertoire of not only the types of textures that they're eating, but the variety of foods that they're eating, that can be another time where we see big challenges. And so one of the things that I wanted to share is just sometimes we feel like we have to wait for a child to fail before we intervene. And I want to encourage people not to do that. So first things first, set yourself up for success. So little tiny infants need supportive positioning. So you can do a full swaddle, you can do a half swaddle. Don't forget about their feet. Their little bodies need a lot of stability, and that comes from their feet. So make sure you provide support there. And then the second thing I want parents to know is that infants aren't born able to socialize and eat at the same time. So that's a skill that we have to develop, and that comes with time. So to set yourself up for success, you can just limit the amount of expectation you have for the baby to look at your face, limit the input that you give them. Don't expect them to participate in back and forth games while they're feeding. Just let them feed. And then when they show that they're organized, their body is calm, and they're successful, they'll initiate looking at you, and they'll initiate communication and show that they're ready. And then you can play some of those fun games and socialize and communicate during feedings.
Is about 4 months the time where we might start to see any signs? Is that the earliest, or is it from sucking, from breastfeeding, or from bottle feeding from the very beginning?
Two separate things. So that 4 to 6 month window is more about when we move from reflexive to something that they have to control and they have to coordinate. That's a different shift than the social piece. The social piece will depend on the little one. And really it's just for parents to know that there is an order of operations, and that feeding will be the first, and then socializing and feeding will come later. It depends on the little one when that will happen, but just set yourself up for success by not bombarding them with lots of information and talking and look at my face and smile at me and here's the bottle, and then wonder why they're not successful, because they need time to coordinate all of those skills.
What about the whole, look at the airplane, here it comes?
Well, luckily, we don't introduce the airplane until they're eating solid.
Okay.
So that happens a little bit later. And so that can definitely be successful for some kiddos.
Okay. All right. Wait, one other question. You said support their feet. Are you talking about while swaddling?
Yeah. So a lot of we'll see parents do a beautiful job with a nice swaddle. They'll have their babies close against their chest. They'll give them all this wonderful support, and their little feet will be dangling. And so you want to make sure that the feet are included in that swaddle, or that they're resting on your boppy or your arm, or they're actually supported as well, not dangling. The other thing is, feeding can feel kind of scary if we're not getting enough nutrition into little ones. And so one thing I want parents to know is you don't want to continue to feed if the baby's showing signs that they're done. So even if you have another ounce in the bottle, if the baby's showing signs that they're done, let them have that break. Because what happens with really tiny infants is they can actually burn more calories than they take in if the feeding takes too long and it's too effortful. So you really want to be thoughtful about reading their signs. And when they show that they need a break, it's okay to give them a break. Even if your goal was 4 ounces and they only got 3.5, that's okay. You can make up for that later. You can adjust the feeding times and play with that a little bit, and a specialist can help you. And that's the final point that I want to make is get help. Don't wait to fail. There are lots of wonderful specialists in a lot of different areas that can support you to be successful. So reach out to them.
So let's get into some of those supports. Like, who are they and how does somebody get them?
Well, this is a great topic. There are a lot of different people who can help you, particularly with feeding, but also with all kinds of development. So when we think about milestones, we want to use milestone references as a guide, but we don't want to live and die by them. And remember that when a child is meeting a milestone, it should happen within a range, and it should typically happen in a certain order. But looking at milestones of a child and comparing them to a checklist, it's not a report card for a parent. It doesn't say, oh, good, you did a great job, or, oh, no, you're doing a bad job. It's just meant to guide you and say, oh, here's what we're expecting to see. And if we're not seeing that, let's get someone in there. So for gross motor skills, which are kind of those big skills like crawling and pulling to stand and then walking, typically the specialists that help with that are physical therapists. If there's a little delay in that, a physical therapist. Then things that we call fine motor skills, like picking up a little something to eat or exploring toys or passing toys back and forth, those early skills are typically addressed by an occupational therapist. And then things like communication.
I always got confused about what an occupational therapist did. It was, I could never quite understand it. So, okay, so with the fine motor skills, everyday tasks, that type of thing. I know now. But,
yeah, and this is an oversimplification, of course, of all of these professionals' areas of expertise. They have a lot of knowledge, but the work of the child or the occupation of a child is play. So thinking about those daily routines and how they can use their fine motor skills to play. And then a speech language pathologist who typically we focus on cognitive development, so thinking skills, and then communication. And any of the above can address feeding challenges. It's sort of a specialty area. Often you'll see occupational therapists or speech pathologists who have that specialty area.
Okay. Yeah. Cool. Well, so most of our families that I work with I work with hopeful adoptive parents and help them navigate the adoption process. And most of them, not all, but most of them are going to adopt newborn babies. And so I'm wondering if trauma in utero increases a child's chance of developing feeding issues or problems with language, some of these things that you are dealing with.
Yeah, absolutely. So experiences in utero impact not only development, but can also impact us throughout the lifespan. We're finding more and more research that supports that those early in utero experiences can actually impact us throughout our lifespan. And some of those experiences include things like maternal stress, nutrition, exposure to substances, and access to medical care. So the good news is if you are aware of the risks, you can be on the lookout for signs of delay, that maybe things aren't happening as either in the order you expected or as timely as you expected. And you can get help and support right away. And you can also promote healthy development through your daily routines, but really building great communication, great routines into your daily activities with your child is the best way to sort of promote that healthy development. There is, I mentioned that there are some resources for milestones and to look for those. There's a campaign called Learn the Signs, Act Early on the CDC website. And that's a really nice website. You can put in your child's age by months, and you can sort of see the gross motor, the fine motor, the communication skills that you should expect to see around that time. And that can be a really nice resource to know, oh, I better talk to my doctor about this, or I better get a referral to a specialist.
Yeah, that's perfect. I'm assuming they still have those like weekly or monthly emails that you can sign up for.
Yeah.
Tell you what the development is. I know while you're pregnant, but I think it even continues after that.
Yeah.
You know what I'm talking about?
I do know what you're talking about. And I know that the Learn the Sign to Act Early campaign with the CDC was just revamped around sort of the timing of the milestones and when to actually look for help. And they've expanded it to include some different skills. So I like that resource because I know there's a lot of research that goes into that. I think some of the other ones are probably great trackers as well. I'm just not as familiar with them. So
okay. Yeah. But look for those if you are, even if you're not pregnant, just to know what's going on in the development of your child during that time and right afterwards is fascinating.
Isn't it amazing? So amazing.
And actually, you're talking about resources and everything. I always got confused, and I'm just starting to learn a little bit more about what early intervention means, what it includes, who should get that and who not. I'm starting to think and understand that anyone who adopts should start looking for early intervention specialists that will work with you because the child is coming into your life from trauma, but can you tell me what that term means and how do you get it?
Yes. So navigating the systems of support can be a full-time job. And it's not surprising that you're still navigating it and figuring it out, because one of the things that's a little bit challenging is early intervention has federal funding, which is an umbrella, and that's under the Individuals with Disabilities Education Act. Part C looks at early intervention funding, but every state has a unique setup for early intervention. And so that's part of why it's so confusing, especially if you're supporting parents in multiple states. Their state's early intervention system is going to be unique to their state. And so that can be a lot to navigate. But basically, what's common through all the early intervention programs is that they are typically designed for children with identified disabilities that will cause developmental delays or who are at risk for. And so, as you said, any parent who's adopted an infant or a child, they're potentially at risk for developmental disabilities. And the idea is that if you have this support, which is early intervention, we can prevent some of those delays from happening, and we can sort of get in before we see the problems occur. And so what early intervention typically entails is an evaluation of some sort that says if the child qualifies for services, either because they're showing a delay or because they're at risk for one. And then usually it happens in the home. So you'll have a team of folks who come to your home and address the issues. You might have a developmental specialist who could be your primary point of contact. And then if there are gross motor concerns, they bring in a PT who could work with you. If there are feeding concerns, you have either an occupational therapist or a speech pathologist. It's usually parent goal driven, and it's usually driven by the needs of the child, the functional needs of the child, as opposed to under the medical model where we usually see a deficit-based approach. And once you've addressed that deficit, services stop. So most early intervention services can be from birth to 3 years of age, and then little ones will transition into the preschool systems, and they move into that kind of preschool through 12th grade system.
So is that when it ends at the preschool years?
Often, yeah. Depending on the state, some of them are 0 to 3 and some of them are 0 to 5. But it kind of depends on how the state is set up to transition that care. If the child needs services still and there's preschool supports in place. So, yeah, but it's different for every state. The CDC also has a website for that where you can click on your state and you can learn contact information for the early intervention program.
Okay,
And
that's what I was going to ask you. What you
yeah,
can do, just go Google
yeah,
early intervention and the
yeah.
CDC, is it just cdc.org or something? And you put
It's
your
cdc.gov and then
Got
/ NCBDDD / act early / milestones. I can provide it to you if
that would be
you
great.
have a way to share that.
Show notes,
Yeah,
yes.
yeah, that'd be great. And then you click on your state, and then you can self-refer. So if you're a
Okay.
parent, you don't have to go
Okay,
through
great.
a doctor. You can self-refer and say, I want an evaluation. These are my
Yeah.
concerns.
And I thank you for that. I
Mhm.
think these practical things, like what exactly, where do I go? What do I do?
Yeah.
It's so hard to navigate anytime you need supports, right? If you have to go
Yes.
through the state systems, it's not easy. Before we go on, we're going to take a quick break, but don't go away. We still have so much to talk about. The Adoption Roadmap podcast is sponsored by the Adoption Roadmap Academy, the only online program of its kind for hopeful adoptive parents like you who want step-by-step guidance, preparing for your home study, creating a compelling adoption profile book, choosing the right agencies, and more so that you can bring your baby home sooner. As an adoption consultant and adoptive mom who's been where you are, I'm going to guide you step by step through everything you need to know about the domestic infant adoption journey from home study to finalization. And the great part is you get to do it at your own pace with a supportive community behind you. The Adoption Roadmap Academy is a step-by-step guide to domestic infant adoption for hopeful individuals and families who are sick and tired of waiting forever. It's the first and only self-paced adoption consultant-led program that shows you exactly how to navigate the domestic adoption process from home study to finalization. With our proven 4-step adoption roadmap model, you're going to be able to save time you can't make up, hours and weeks and even months of tedious legwork and research are done for you. You're going to be able to go at your own pace. No matter what else is going on in life, nobody's going to be breathing down your throat. You are going to be able to gain and keep momentum because everything is going to be spoon-fed for you in exactly the way you need. You are going to possibly even save money by knowing how to vet situations and working with the right agencies. It could save you a lot of heartache. You are going to be able to access this course anytime, anywhere, and get expert guidance and support, not only by me, but also by an amazing community who know exactly what you are walking through. Here's what you can expect inside. You'll be getting streaming videos, worksheets, bonus resources, an adoption profile creation, agency contacts, live streams to connect with other people, and unending education, all using our 4-step proprietary adoption roadmap model. Plus, you'll be receiving a bonus mindset step that I highly recommend for everyone. So if you're interested in starting your adoption journey and ready to fast forward and simplify your domestic adoption process, please email the word academy to support@rgadoptionconsulting.com today, and we'll get you started. And the other thing that I think is probably worth mentioning is that, not all pediatricians and doctors are going to have a good basic understanding of adoption and this whole idea of trauma being attached to adoption. And so if you go and ask a doctor and they say, no, your baby's fine, you don't need this, make sure that you're advocating for yourself. And by the way, if you can get these supports for free, go take them, because later on in life, as your child's school age and you start seeing learning problems or ADHD or executive functioning, the more you can have a trail to show that you've had these supports, the easier it's going to be to get more supports. That's something that I have learned the hard way, and I wish someone would have told me about early interventions.
Yeah, you're exactly right. The purpose of early intervention is also to work with the parent to support all of those skills, not just the skills with your child, but your own advocacy skills, and to help kind of understand the systems and what happens if my services end at 3, what happens next? Okay, now I'm navigating educational systems. And then, for some families, they might feel like, well, I can afford to do this privately. But what you might find is that there aren't systems in place. Even if you have the money, it's really hard to set that up for yourself privately. So
Right.
it's almost inevitable, even though early intervention isn't determined by income, it's not an income-driven process to qualify for services. You will inevitably be a part of it if your child is showing signs that they need some extra support. So it's good to know how to navigate those systems for sure.
Yeah. How does it change as far as any of the like feeding issues, communication issues? Do you think it changes when you've worked with children through adoption, whether the child was adopted at a little later in life or earlier as infants? Do you think that makes a difference in some of these issues that we're talking about?
Yeah, definitely. So when a child's adopted a little later, you have all of those same risk factors of exposures or experiences in utero. And then you have them combined with lived experiences in whatever setting they were living in before that or after birth. And so you definitely see a change. You can definitely see some challenges. Like, for example, I remember I had a little one who I evaluated in kind of a shelter situation.
Okay.
And she qualified for services because she wasn't communicating at all, because she had been in a situation for the first year of her life where if she asked for something, there wasn't a responsive caregiver giving it to her. So she stopped crying, she stopped communicating, she stopped verbalizing. And so it was nice because we could work quickly to develop those skills when she had an adult communication partner that was responsive. But her pathway to delay was a little different. It was more influenced by the environment that she was in. And so when you have children that you adopt a little bit older, there's positive and negative experiences that they've had that you want to just be thoughtful about and help support them and understand them as best as you can. And sometimes you don't know.
That's really interesting that when they're not getting what they need, when they're trying to communicate it, they stop communicating. And I never thought about that. Like if you are bringing a child in who has done that, and you're now bringing them into your life who's more, and you want to give this child everything they need, and you just assume that, oh, when they're tired, they'll cry. When they're hungry, they'll cry. When they need their diaper changed, they'll cry. But then what if they don't? Like, you have to know that they might not, and you need to be you need to be checking. And that never even dawned on me. That's interesting.
And in some ways, you might see, from a behavior perspective, you might see, oh, things are getting worse, not better. Because once they learn, I can control my environment. When I cry, I can control my adult people will respond to me. You might see a little bit more of those behaviors. And you might think, uh-oh, we're going in the wrong direction. This little one's really struggling. But it's actually a good sign they're learning what happens and their impact on the world when they communicate.
You mentioned some of the developmental milestones that we should be paying attention to. Is there anything else that we missed that are like clear things for parents to look for, and then any strategies you can share for promoting communication and bonding?
Yeah. So the primary milestones, again, are typically those gross motor movements, so those big body movements, those fine motor kinds of things, and then communication. And so great communication starts with being a good adult communication partner. That is the one thing that we can do first and foremost to really help little ones be successful. And so that means responding to your infant or your child's communication, even when it's not words. So if it's a gesture, if it's a look, if it's an if it's a grunt, if it's a cry, we can assign meaning to those things, and we can teach them their words that go with them, and we can start building their vocabulary and their communication skills just by recognizing they're communicating something even in this nonverbal way. And so another thing you can do that's really helpful for early communication is during play or during daily routines, use simple single words or short phrases and pair them with the play or the routine or the activity. So we typically start with the words that are most important to the child. So it takes a lot of thought on our part to think, what do they care about, right? What do they want? What are they interested in? And so we might start with family members, pets, can be those family members, labels of favorite foods, favorite toys, and action words that go with daily routine. So for example, if a little one is reaching up to you or you're reaching down to pick them up, before you pick them up, you say up and pick them up. So they start to know, oh, I can make that sound. I can do that thing when I reach my arms up. And that's a really nice way to start to attach language to the behaviors that you're seeing and teach kiddos that they have the power to do that as well.
Can you give a couple other examples, like simple examples like that? I love that.
Yeah. Well, another thing I love to do is to offer choices. Okay, so if you, first of all, make sure the choices are both okay with you, because you never know what someone's going to pick. But if you're getting dressed in the morning, do you want the yellow or the blue? Do you want the shirt or the dress? You know, whatever it is, you can give those choices and then let them have the autonomy and the communication to be able to point to it, gesture towards it, make a sound, try to imitate the word if they're at that level. These are really nice early language strategies that help kiddos. Same thing with meal times. It's great to have choices. It manages a lot of behaviors. It's no problem if you have this spoon or that spoon to me, so why not let you pick the spoon? You know, these are things that are no trouble for us, but they really reinforce a respect for the little person's autonomy and the power that they have over the world when they use communication. It's very empowering to get your adult to do all the things that you want through words. So the more that you can reinforce that, the better off they're going to feel, and you're building skill at the same time.
And neat. It's so simple, but
yeah,
when you say it, it's like, oh, right. Yeah. Like these things that I naturally do are very helpful, but now let me be a little bit more intentional about how I'm doing these things. Are there other best practices that parents can use to help support healthy development of our children, especially if they have disabilities or difficulties maybe around feeding or?
Yeah. So the first thing I want to mention, because it's something I feel like we overlook, is go easy on yourself. This can be really challenging when a child is struggling to do something like eat or communicate. It's very easy for us to feel like we're failing. It's very easy to fall into that trap. And it can be frustrating too. You know, we all react to failure in our own ways too. And so some people, it makes them really mad. Some people, it makes them really sad. Some people say, I'm bad at this, I'm going to avoid it. You know, there's lots of ways that we can sort of be triggered by this experience. So it's important to know, even if a child is communicating and we are not successfully communicating with them, that gives them a chance to learn other skills. So they might learn how to correct their communication, which is an important language skill. If I didn't understand, they said, and I got them the milk and they really wanted a cookie, then they can learn correction skills. Oh, she got it wrong. How do I persist? How do I adjust my communication? Those are important skills. Sometimes when we don't get what we need when we ask for it or get what we want, we can develop resilience strategies, right? I was disappointing and I'm still going to be okay. So just know, even when things aren't going perfectly, they're still developing important skills that they're going to benefit from. And then the second thing, we've talked a lot about this, and this can be challenging to navigate the systems. It's something I helped with, but get the help of a professional who specializes in the area that's challenging. So, you know, with feeding, it's really easy to get scared. It's really easy to say, oh my goodness, this little person is not going to thrive. For some people, that can come with the threat of intervention. You know, your baby's not thriving. We're going to have the protective services step in. It can be really complicated and scary. Just remember, the most important thing is the relationship with your child and to get that support so that you can be successful. And then something I don't know that we talk about this enough is to make space for all that you're going through. So create space, with kiddos that are experiencing development differently than we expected. Sometimes we can have grief, and that can show up when they're 8 years old at Halloween because we thought trick-or-treating would look one way. It can surprise us. It can come at different times. We also can have joy that's different than anything we could have imagined. And when our expectations were one way and we have to shift our expectations, that's always a process. So it's really, really important for caregivers to build supports into their life so that they can take care of themselves, because they're going to be experiencing all of that. And then they're available for the joy and the challenges and the frustration and all the things. So I like to talk about that because I think we don't always talk about that as much as we should for caregivers.
It's so important. I mean, people are so scared to ask for support, and it is so important. I wish it was talked about more, that it should just be part of parenthood, especially when you're new parents, right? This is what you're going to need, and this is how you're going to get it. And we need to talk about it more. What role do you see education and advocacy playing in the adoption community to promoting awareness and understanding of these unique needs?
So first, education for adoptive parents so that they have a sense of some of the things to expect, things they might encounter, some of the unique needs of infants and children who have been either in foster care or orphanages or at risk for developmental delay. Those are really important things that I think we could support. Which is
most of our kiddos, by the way.
Yeah, absolutely. It's exactly true. And so I think it would be great to have the opportunity to provide more of that educational piece across the board. And then I also believe there's a really important space for employers to have some idea about education, about the supports and the benefits that adoptive parents uniquely need. So they, again, if they have a child with a developmental delay, they may need a little bit more of a flexible schedule to be able to accommodate appointments for their child, which are going to be more frequent and they're going to be ongoing long term. And so I think there's an important space for employers to have a better understanding of some of these issues. And then finally, I think early educational settings need more support to have the education for how to be more inclusive of kiddos who are diverse learners or maybe have diverse needs so that they can experience early childhood education the same as their peers. And like you said, that's a lot of kiddos who are part of the adoption community are going to fall into that category. And so I think there's a lot of work for us to do around early childhood education, both in terms of providing the professional development, but also the policies and the practice changes that need to happen. So little ones truly can be included in that process.
Yeah, and you mentioned something about employers, and what I'm finding is that more and more employers, especially large companies, are becoming more adoption friendly and realizing that maybe families who are adopting have different needs or need more time or need to spend more time with a child to bond or things like that. So that's really great to see. Are there things that we can start doing as we're going through the process to kind of create a more supportive environment for when our kids come to us to have a more healthy development? Before we go on, we're going to take a quick break, but don't go away. We still have so much to talk about. Hey there, Adoption Roadmap fam. Are you ready to take the next step on your journey to parenthood? If so, head over to our website and take our quiz. It's called, Are You Ready to Adopt? It's not just about testing your knowledge. It's about making sure you're emotionally and practically prepared for the beautiful, complex journey of adoption. Let's make your dream of parenthood a reality. Go to rgadoptionconsulting.com and take the Are You Ready to Adopt quiz today. That's rgadoptionconsulting.com. The quiz is free, and it will let you know where you are in the process and if you're ready to jump into your adoption journey to have a more healthy development.
Absolutely. So the first is that understanding and becoming familiar with developmental milestones, but don't allow them to take over your life, right? So remember, they are a guide. They are meant to help you to sort of know what is expected, what order it's expected, and a range of time, but it's not a report card on your parenting. So don't let it take over, but definitely familiarize yourself with those important milestones.
Neither is your children's behavior,
Yeah.
FYI, a report card on your parenting.
Yes.
That reminds me, I
Absolutely.
just read something about that recently, about how people are so quick to judge what kind of parent you are based on if your kid acts out one day, or, you know, it has nothing to do with it. You can do your best and, you know, still have that, or vice versa. So keep
Exactly
going.
right. You are exactly right. And then set yourself up for success. So try to build those good communication strategies into your daily routines. Have daily routines.
Yes.
Create as much structure and predictability as you can. Respond to nonverbal and verbal communication. Offer choices. Label things for your little ones. And then if you're concerned, and you're wrong, it's no problem, but get help. So reach out, especially for those early intervention services. You can self-refer regularly if you need to. You can have an evaluation and then 6 months later have another evaluation. So reach out to folks, get help. Don't wait till you're failing to feel like, okay, this is justified for me to use these services. The services are meant to be preventative. So they're intended, if they're working well, they're promoting healthy development, and we're not waiting for kids to fail before we start. And then it's never too late to make adjustments that will help you and your child thrive. So if you didn't have early intervention and you're seeing some challenges with your 9-year-old or your 12-year-old, it's okay to reach out for help then too. It's never too late.
And where would they go for that if the child is older?
Typically, you would start with your school system. So the public schools also have legislation that require that a kiddo be evaluated if there's concerns and if they're showing difficulties. So good relationships with your teachers, your child's teachers, really talking through the concerns that you're having, what you're seeing, and educating yourself on what supports are available. And again, you know, that's something that I try to help parents with as well, is to navigate systems in their area appropriate for their child's needs within the confines of what their state is providing. So,
yeah, it's not easy. And I like how you said, you know, if you go one time and you don't get the answer you want, go again and go again and go again until you get what you need. Because oftentimes with these systems, they're not the best systems, and you need to push because they're not always so readily agreeable to give you what you're asking for. So you often you have to know how to become an advocate for your child. And the other thing, I think, 2 other things that came to mind, I think as you're going through the process, maybe after you're matched or something, make a call to earlier intervention. Find out what it looks like, what you'll need to do, when you can start it. Can you start to fill out some paperwork now? You know, find out, put those things in place, because when you are a new parent, things get very hectic, and the more you can kind of organize and have those resources available for you at your fingertips, the better it will be. The second thing is there are many states who have post-adoption support for children through adoption. So find that out too. How? I'm not exactly sure. Ask your adoption agency. Google is your best friend, right? Just go online and Google post-adoption support in your state, in your city, and you'd be surprised what you might find.
That's great. Those are such good tips. So smart to be prepared when you have the time, because you know there will be a time when you do not. Yeah, that's smart.
Yes. So Maureen, where can people find you to connect if they have more questions or want to learn more?
Yeah, well, I have a website, exaltimplementationinstitute.com is my company's website. I'm on LinkedIn, Maureen Dikinga. And I'd love to help support caregivers. I love to help support families to thrive with their kiddos, especially kiddos that might learn or develop a little differently because they're lovely. They're some of my favorite people on this world. Yeah.
Absolutely. Do you work with families all over the country?
Yeah. So I support families more from a systems level now. I don't provide speech therapy services and feeding services directly anymore. That was part of my shift in wanting to have that greater impact. So yeah, anybody can reach out. And again, I provide educational resources specific to different developmental delays or disabilities. I provide services to help connect people with the systems in their area and just kind of guidance and support and just that wonderful thing, which is parenting a child who they've adopted.
Yes. Well, I like to end all of the podcasts with a series of kind of rapid fire questions. I'm wondering if there's been anyone in the adoption world that has left a positive impact on you.
I've had the opportunity to meet amazing parents. And I think one parent that I worked with was one of the first parents that had adopted a child from China. And her partner, her spouse, they were just lovely in their dedication to connecting their kiddo to his root. So making sure that he was connected to the Chinese Cultural Center and really going above and beyond to honor his background and where he came from for him. And I think that was something that really delighted me. It was before I had worked globally. And as I worked globally later, I thought back on how important and generous that was of the adoptive parents to do that. It was beautiful.
That's awesome. Perfect shot. If you could be remembered, Maureen, for one thing, what would it be?
I think probably just sort of being useful and of service, that supportive nature. If I had to pick one, it would be that.
Perfect. What's one thing you're most excited about?
I'm excited about this next phase of my career, shifting away from direct services and really hoping to affect some change on a larger scale level. I'm excited about that.
To see that. What's the most important lesson you've learned over the course of your career, or an important lesson?
Patience with myself and not to give in to sort of the pressure of performing. When you're a therapist, sometimes you're working with a little person, but you're also working with their parents. And sometimes their parents want an approach that might be really aggressive or performance driven. And I think for me, it was important for me to learn that by modeling not giving into that, I'm actually teaching the parents something that will help them with their child as well.
Absolutely. In 3 words, describe adoption.
Delightful, promising, hopeful.
Thank you so much for being with us today. And if you want to learn more about Maureen, you can find it in the show notes. Otherwise, I hope that you will tune in next time on the Adoption Roadmap podcast. Bye-bye.
Thank you for having me.
Well, I hope you enjoyed that episode of the Adoption Roadmap podcast. If you did, I have a few favors to ask of you. First, please hit subscribe so you never miss an episode. And while you're at it, I'd love to hear your takeaways. Please write a review and let me know what you liked. And if you have a question or a suggestion on what you'd like to hear, I'd love to hear that too. Please shoot me an email at support@rgadoptionconsulting.com and let me know what you'd like to hear about. And if you have a question, I may just answer it online. Thanks again for listening. Tune in every Wednesday and Friday morning for a brand new episode of the Adoption Roadmap podcast. Until next time, bye-bye.